sta aan de Amstel voor het huis van Petro. En Petro is een drummer, een legendarische drummer, wederom. Hij is een van mijn 2 favoriete drummers in Amsterdam. En hij heeft mij geïnspireerd om zelf slagwerk te gaan spelen. Het is een hele aardige man. We gaan het interview in het Engels doen. En hij woont op deze boot, dus ik ga maar even naar binnen. Hello.
Come in, it's cold.
It's Laura.
Hello.
Petro.
Well, this is a surprise. Yeah, go now beneden.
Ja. Dag Kika.
David.
Hi.
Kijk. Heb jij dit besteld?
Nee. Well, yeah, be seated.
Petro.
Yes.
This is your drum kit. How long do you own this drum kit?
I bought it in Melbourne, in Australia, in 1969.
And what is so special about this drum kit?
It's probably the only one in Europe because the factory doesn't exist anymore.
What's the name of the factory?
It was called Druin
Uh-huh.
in Brisbane, in Queensland, and most of the rock and pop drummers in the late '60s bought lots of these kits, but
And why is that?
because it was cheap and it was very popular. The other kits, Rogers or Ludwig, they're much at Slingerland, much more expensive,
Yeah.
and
So this is cheap, but you like it very much. What do you like about it?
well, the sound
Yeah.
and the way I tune it, because I tune very high.
Yeah, you like high tuning. Your bass is very. Usually a bass is very low.
Yeah, that's why it's called a bass drum. Yeah.
And then what do you like about the high sound, or can't you
Well-
explain that?
No, it's just a matter of taste. Because it has, I can't really explain it. It's a matter of taste. Each drummer has his own way of tuning drums,
Yeah.
and this is mine.
Yeah. And there's this very small hi-hat.
Yeah.
That's also very special.
Yeah. They're not really hi-hats. They're called croutals,
Ah.
and normally you have about a stand so big, and then you have 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and you hit them with mallets, and they have different tones. So, but
Yeah.
they're not really hi-hats. I just use them because I like that sound.
Yeah, in jazz the hi-hat is very popular, or very important, I mean. And you have chosen this very strange small sound.
Yeah. Again, it's just a question of taste. That's all. Yeah. Because I've played the larger ones, and I like this one. I mean, the larger ones, you can sound like anybody, but if you play this, you can only sound like yourself.
Yeah, and how do you play this hi-hat? For instance, in the that many jazz drummers play.
Yeah.
How do you play that on this one?
Well, the normal way, but yeah, the same thing. It's just the sound is different. It sounds a bit like Hare Krishnas, if you like.
Okay, you first started playing in Australia. You were born in 1950.
Yeah.
You started playing when you were 16.
Well, they're playing drums, yeah.
Yeah. Before that, you were hitting with sticks on different.
Yeah, in the
How
kitchen.
did you do that?
Or just in the kitchen on the pots and pans, and on
With
the-
what?
Oh, I can't remember. Maybe wooden clothes hangers, or spoons, or I can't remember. It's a long time ago.
And
But that was nothing. All kids do things like that. I mean, I didn't pretend. I didn't want to be a drummer at that time. I was just, fucking around.
fucking around.
Mhm.
And then you started playing drums. This had something to do with a radio show. Could you tell me how that went?
Oh, that was. I came home from school one afternoon, and there was a program on the radio, and if you were the first to telephone, they would give you free music lessons for a month. So I was very quick and phoned and got on the line first, and the man said, "Yeah, you're on first. You've won the free music lessons. What instrument you want to play?" And I just didn't think at all. I just said drums, just like that. No particular reason.
Yeah, maybe it had something to do with the glamour of the drums.
No, playing drums is not glamorous. It's boring. I mean, look, in most bands, the drummer sits in the back behind all the other musicians, and backs the other musicians. Anyway, so I did.
But it was very associative. Your answer.
Associative of what?
Yeah, of drumming.
Don't know. I mean,
It had to mean something,
I
don't you?
guess so. Maybe I secretly wanted to annoy my father, because he, at that time when I was at school, after school I was always hanging out on the street with my friends, and he didn't like that, so he said, one time he said, "Don't hang out in the street with your friends and get into all sorts of trouble, get a hobby." So then I said, "Okay, I'm going to play drums," and he said, "Not that hobby." So maybe it had something to do with that.
What didn't he like about you playing with friends?
No, playing in the streets, when you're kids you get into all sorts of trouble,
Yeah.
as normal kids do.
Okay. But you first wanted to play before the radio show. You want to play
Bass guitar.
bass guitar.
Yeah, which was sort of glamorous, if you like.
And that stopped when you started playing drums.
Yeah. Don't know why. It was just some idea I had in my head about a bass guitar. I'm glad I do this, actually.
Okay, then you started the lessons. Did you learn something from it?
Yeah, I had 4 lessons once a week for 1 hour per lesson. And after the 4 weeks, my teacher he told me he couldn't teach me anymore because he didn't know any more himself. Ja, echt waar. So then
What did that mean? Did it mean that you were very talented or that he was a stupid teacher?
No, he knew what he was doing, but he was limited in his knowledge.
Okay.
But I learned very quickly.
Yeah.
And then after 4 weeks, he couldn't teach me anymore. So then I started learning from books and took that further. And then after some years, then I threw the books away because the books were not so interesting.
And what kind of music did you listen to at that age?
Well, 16, all the pop music that was on the radio.
1966?
Yeah, Rolling Stones, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, all those people.
Did you go and imitate drummers?
Yeah, of course, when you first start to play, you imitate everyone. Ginger Baker for the Cream, the drummer from Hendrix's band, but I never tried to imitate Ringo Starr or Charlie Watts.
You immediately saw that they were not so interesting.
Oh, Charlie Watts is a good drummer. He was playing in, I think, rhythm and blues bands before he joined the Stones, so he knew what he was doing. But? Mr. Starkey, no. Actually, stop.
Could you?
You better not put this on the BBC.
Could you recall the way you played in those early days?
Yeah, it was just straight ahead rock and roll.
Go ahead.
Let's do it like this.
Why is that?
Oh, just because this doesn't sound so good for playing rock and roll. This is a much nicer sound. tune we're gonna play now? Okay, I try something from what I can remember from the Cream. Yeah, okay. And so forth, just very straight, very simple.
So then you started playing in bands?
Yeah, but before that,
Yeah.
when I was even younger, I was probably 11 or 12. I was still at school, and some representatives came round from the Mafra Town marching band because they wanted young kids from school to learn brass instruments. So a whole bunch went there, and I also went there, and I ended up picking up the baritone horn, which is like a small tuba. So I did that for about 6 months or so, but only in rehearsals. We never got to march on the streets. So that was basically my first instrument that was serious. My sister had a melodica years before, which I just methodically took apart and broke it and threw it away because I didn't like melodica, actually.
Did you like your sister?
At that time, yeah. Well, you met her. She was here the last time you were here.
Yeah.
I'm glad she's not here anymore, actually.
Okay, but then you started playing drums in bands. What kind of?
In pop bands.
Yeah.
Doing the same. I think the first band. We didn't have a bass player actually in the first band when I was in school. And then we played Beatle tunes and Shadow tunes and the pop stuff like that. But that band only lasted, I think, a short time. And then I joined another band, which I think was a trio, guitar, bass and drums. And then most of that was some of my tunes which I wrote at the time, and other pop tunes, I think from,
So very early on you started writing.
yeah, because I was doing, I was writing poetry at school. So years later, I included those lyrics into some chords on the guitar.
What kind of poems were they?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. I don't have them anymore. Just about life in general and about love and anything that you... Yeah, when you're 14, 15, 16, what do you write about? About the world around you.
Yeah.
So I used some of those lyrics into some of the songs that we did.
Alright.
Unfortunately, I don't have any of the books with the poems or the tapes which were recorded. But anyway, it was a long time ago, and it's just pop music, yeah?
Yeah.
Anyway, with this trio at the time, we did a lot of improvising, and but in the pop and the rock tradition, and we also played a lot of blues. So through most of the pop and rock bands in Australia, I was always improvising, and that's one of the reasons I got kicked out of a lot of rock bands, because they want a metronome. They don't want improvising drummer. They want someone just to keep a strict time, like I just played for you before.
Yeah. Yeah, you wanted freedom.
Of course. I mean, who wants to sit behind a drum kit? Chick, 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 chick. That's boring.
You can't get a kick out of just keeping the pace.
Keeping time. Yeah, okay. It's also like this. If you play a normal standard. Now that's also keeping strict time. It's also very boring. Now there's especially on some of the Miles Davis recordings, Philly Joe Jones does that all the time. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
But the whole to do a concert the whole night playing that's a bit much. Okay, you can do it in one tune, and I do it occasionally, but when it's called for in the workshops that I do, but for the rest, rather not.
So how do you play? How do you prefer to play the same song you just played?
Well, just break it up into different, different accents. Now it sounds a lot more busy.
Yeah.
Um,
So many musicians will complain about your way of playing.
Probably, but yeah. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. I think last year I went to a session in the Badkuip here in Amsterdam,
Yeah.
and I sat in for a couple of tunes, and there was one young alto player who I think was a conservatory student or something like that, and I sat in for 2 numbers. Had a very nice time. Piano player I know also sat in, so we had nice rapport together. And I just played my normal things, and afterwards the young alto player came up and said, "Hey man, I'm trying to be creative. Don't play so loud behind me, yeah?" Now, he said, "I'm not Sean Burgin or I'm not Paul Stocker," so I said, "Then go home and practice. Don't come and complain to me."
Yeah. So that's why you only want to play with the best musicians.
Not necessarily. I just want to have a good time when I'm playing.
Okay.
Simple as that.
And how did this pop improvising go? I mean, it's not very usual in pop music to really improvise, or is it?
You can basically improvise on any type of music, on any tune.
But for instance, Hey Joe
Yeah.
with sticks.
No, actually, probably with mallets would be better.
Hey Joe, Jimi Hendrix.
I don't think he wrote it. I think someone else wrote it, and he did another version. But okay. It's a long time since I played that tune, and I'm not such a good singer, and I've forgotten the word. Hey, Joe.
Okay, but you were already improvising in Australia, so it was a very natural thing maybe to get into jazz.
I guess so. I mean, it's the obvious thing to first playing in pop bands, and then rock bands, and then blues. Of course, you have to go into something else.
Yeah. When did you start playing jazz?
Well, jazz per se, let's say in London in 1975.
Yeah, you moved to London in '74. Why was that?
Because the music scene in Australia at that time for me was not very interesting. There was hardly any so-called jazz music on the radio or television. You did get the occasional tours, the Buddy Rich Big Band, the Jazz All-Stars with Dizzy Gillespie, Blakey, Monk, I think Sonny Stitt and Elmer Gibbon.
Yeah.
But not so many. And in Europe and America, well, there's more overall happening. Now in Australia, the scene has changed a lot more. Now, from what I've heard, because I haven't been back since '74, but I've heard that it's very healthy there at the moment.
Did you miss Australia?
The countryside, yeah. Because it is a wonderful country. It's so big, it's beautiful. Nothing wrong with being small. Holland is a small country, but Holland's also very nice.
Yeah.
But it's so big there.
And your roots are there.
No, my roots are European. My father is from the Ukraine, and my mother is from Germany. And I was born in Australia. So what does that make me? I have an Australian passport. Does that make me Australian or European?
So maybe you feel rather more Ukrainian.
Oh, I feel I just feel me, that's all.
Okay.
A label, you put a label on someone, you give someone a passport here, this makes you English. I don't believe in that.
So you don't have a label?
Nay. Mm-mm.
Nee. Okay, so you came to England, and there did exist a sort of a jazz scene.
Oh yeah, it was very big there, but I didn't get involved with that for some time, maybe a couple of years, because in England the jazz scene is a very closed scene. You have to be, well, in Holland it's also a very closed scene. You have to hang out with the boys and like here, and it's very hard to get accepted unless you're a big star immediately. If I had come over as a star from Australia to London, I would have been accepted probably almost immediately, but who wants to be a star anyway?
So how did you choose your way of being accepted?
Just by going to some sessions and playing and sitting in and going to some workshops, music schools. One I went to, which was very important, was every Saturday afternoon by a pianist called Stan Tracy, a wonderful, talented piano player in the style of Monk and Ellington. And I met a lot of other musicians there, and then we formed a couple of bands, and then we played in some bars and pubs. And then you just go around and go to the clubs, and people see you playing, and then you get involved.
Yeah.
Like that.
How did you develop from a pop or a rock drummer into a jazz drummer?
Just a moment. I have to think about that. That's a very difficult question.
To play jazz, you have to have more technical abilities, don't you?
Now, if you consider Sonny Murray a jazz drummer, a good jazz drummer, he was one of the first free jazz drummers to play with Albert Ayler.
Yeah.
Now, if you consider his technique, which is something like this, or was at the time, now is that technique? Because that's what he was playing when he was playing with Ayler. And he said in an interview, I think he also played with Cecil Taylor. He said in an interview before he played with Albert Ayler, he was a good drummer because he was playing. Now that whole question of technique, Buddy Rich was a fantastic technician, a fantastic drummer. He was like a circus performer.
Yeah.
He had all the technique, but it didn't sound like music. It just sounded copybook from exercise books. Louis Bellson the same, fantastic technique. Everything can become straight out of the book. Now, that's not music for me. Max Roach makes mistakes. I make mistakes. A lot of so many drummers make mistakes. You have to make mistakes. You're a human being.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to play exactly every note that's written down from a book and have the fantastic technique, well, fine if you want to. It's like there's people who want to play Coltrane solos note for note. What's
Yeah,
that?
but when I hear you playing, I can hear that you have a lot of technique. So when did you practice that?
Well, when I first started, I wanted to learn paradiddles and triplets and the blah 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 and
So when you were still a pop drummer.
yeah. But now, since I've learned all those so-called necessary rudiments, I don't use them when I'm playing. when you go to school and you learn your English or your mathematics or your whatever you learn. Yeah, then you have it in your head. But what does that do for you later in life? Okay, everyone has to read and write and to count and to multiply and all this. But with music, a paradiddle, you don't need that to make music. It's an old story. All the musicians I know and the ones I've read about, first you learn it and then you forget it and just play. It's simple as that.
Maybe you can give an example of forgetting the technique and still playing.
Okay, let's see. That was Mr. PC by Coltrane, if you didn't recognize it.
So did it have a fixed rhythm?
Yeah, it was all 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath here. Look, if I play it correctly, what's correct? If I play it normal, 1, 2, 3, 4. Da 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 da. And if I play it in the same tempo, but without playing that, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's still the same tune, but it's not this boring.
But that does. You need to have a lot of technique to be able to play that way.
Perhaps. It's not for me to say. I just spent hours and hours, thousands of hours practicing every day. Not necessarily practicing paradiddles, just improvising. For example, if I sit down here, which I try to every day, and play for an hour, I'm not going to go. Because that's boring, and I did that when I was 16. I'll just do this. And that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Okay, you came to Holland at the end of the 70s?
Yeah, 79.
79.
First of January 1979.
What did you like about Holland or dislike about it?
It was so different than living in London. London, we had a terrible time living in London. We were very poor. I had very little concerts, even though I played with some of the best British musicians. And here, when I first came here, it was so different, and England was, well, especially London was so grey and dull and uninspiring, and too much smoking marijuana and hashish, and being very down, but playing the hell out of the music with the other musicians, which was the only thing that saved me there. And then coming here, it's so different. The mentality of the musicians, mentality of the audience, is was so different here at that time. That yeah, put it that way. And then yeah, that's no joke. It was great. The first few years here were wonderful, and meeting all the new musicians and hanging out everywhere. The old Bim house, the old Kroeg.
Yeah.
It was very nice.
Were you still developing your own style, or are you always developing your own style? Or do you think you've found a sort of language to speak via the drums?
Of course, that's what it's for.
When did you find that language?
Gap, hesitate, edit. Also very difficult. When did I find that language?
Well, take your time.
There's some things you can't give answers to.
But for you, playing drums is showing your emotions?
Ha ha ha. Is this emotion? Yeah, it could be. It could be anger, or it can be, yeah. And is that emotion? Now that can be interpreted, I suppose, as emotion. Well, so can this. Is that?
Yeah. Well,
This I made, by the way. So this is love.
well, I don't know. It's for you to answer.
Well, I suppose most musicians who improvise, of course, put their emotions into it. When you have a good band together, or a good company of musicians together, you speak directly to each other through the instrument, through the medium of the instrument. For example, I could never say the things to Sean Bergen straight to his face, because he would throw beer at me again, like he did years ago, yeah? And I threw back my own beer at him. But when we communicate with our instruments, then we talk together.
So that's when you use this big bang you just showed.
Oh, I would never do that in the middle of someone else's solo.
Well, maybe if you were angry.
I'm never really angry when I play. Sometimes, if there are some so-called young musicians who think they're God's gift to the music, and they pretend that hey, I'm the big one, then of course I get angry, but not in a subtle way.
Okay, but you just don't know whether playing drums is your way of showing emotions.
No, it probably is. I mean, for me, I like to sit here and just... How can I be angry when I'm sitting here practicing by myself? There's no point in that.
So it's just a part of your emotions.
Of course it is, because other times I sit behind the keyboard and I write. If I feel myself feeling bad or miserable or something, then it's going to come out in the piece of music that I write. And if I feel in a very good and up and inspiration comes, then the piece of music is going to be different. So it's this, or if I'm playing on conga drum, it's a lot of things.
So if you're feeling bad and you play the drums,
After an hour I feel a lot better. Ja, echt waar.
so it's your has been
It's
a
like
real
a
therapy.
It is, in a way, it's a type of therapy. Well, music is therapy. Some years ago, I was going with a friend of mine to a mentally handicapped place and teaching young kids percussion and piano and things like that. Now, that's therapy for them, and it gives them a nice time. And for me, it's also nice to sit here and play, but it's also nice to go to sessions and sit in with other musicians and play and see what the audience reaction is.
Yeah. How do you communicate with the audience? Do they inspire you,
No,
or you just do your own stuff? And
I do my own stuff, and I play for the other musicians that I'm playing with. The audience is secondary. It's they're out there, so if they're there and if they enjoy it, fine. If they don't enjoy it, I don't mind, because if what we play together works, then we know we've done something. And if the audience can appreciate it and like it, then that makes it better.
And did you learn something from playing on the street about coping with the audience, or you played in the Vondelpark?
Oh yeah, quite often with a large group and also with a quartet and with a trio, and on the Dam Square, and the lights are playing. Playing in the street is quite hard because the audience is moving. So they're not there. They might stand there for 5 minutes, and then they're gone. So you have to get your act together very fast to keep them there. Yeah, in a club or in a cafe or whatever, the audience is there and expecting something from you. But in playing on the street, you have to be very good to have a very good act and keep them there. Otherwise, you don't get any money.
You were going to through very rough times in the 80s, and still maybe you don't have the image you should have, I think. Why is that? Why are you so underrated? And
probably because I want to be where I am. I don't look. You play drums yourself, yeah? So you know what it's like. You have many. Have you played many concerts yourself?
Few.
Fine. So you know what it's like to be on the bandstand.
Yeah. So.
Well, I'm quite nervous, and I don't like people looking at me.
Uh-huh.
Now that's saying something, but why I'm underrated?
But why are you drumming then? Just for yourself?
Well, for me, and for Kika, and for the workshop in Alkmaar, and
so maybe you should just drum here on the boat.
No.
And in the workshops and so on.
It's fun. I like to do it very much.
But for a musician, to play concerts is very important.
Of course it is. You have to communicate. I don't want to go and play in places like Alto or Bourbon Street. I've done that years ago. For 100 guilders, you play till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Now concerts in the BIM House or the other major festivals. Fine, it would be nice to do that again, but
the audience you don't like to be there.
It's not that I hate people. I get very nervous if I'm on the bandstand. That's all. Yeah. As soon as I sit down, then it's fine. But if I know I have to play in a session and I have to get up, then I get very nervous before. Yeah. So that makes it very difficult.
It's just an inborn quality of you.
I don't know, because when now it's
So when did that change?
Probably when I heard Coltrane for the first time.
So, and maybe another thing in this is also that you don't take much compromises. You say what you think.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Of course, everyone has to say it's a free country. Everyone has free speech. You say what you want, but if you say some things to some musicians that is the truth, and they don't accept it, then they're not going to give you gigs anymore.
Yeah, you also told me that the reason why you were thrown out of some bands is a political reason.
No.
It's politics.
Politics? Yeah, okay.
Musicians' politics.
Yeah, it can. It's like you scratch my back, I scratch your back. He's a good friend of mine. He's a drummer, a good drummer friend of mine. Okay, someone has to move. The politics goes very much. It shouldn't in music, but it does.
And how have you coped with that?
Dealt with that? I just let it slide. I don't feel bad about things like that. Not at all.
But maybe you were a victim of it.
Oh yeah. Doesn't matter.
As a jazz musician, you have to have a sort of PR, sort of politics to.
Yeah, correct. And you have to hang out with those people, the Misha's crowd and the Broker crowd and the Sean's crowd and the Paul Stocker's crowd.
You just don't want that.
Oh, I wouldn't mind it, but I'm not Han Benning, and Misha, I think, would prefer to play with Han Benning or with Louis Maholo.
Yeah, so?
Now, since I have played with Misha before in the past, I had a very strange feeling when I was playing with him in the Bim House.
Yeah.
He stopped playing and he leant on the piano and was just staring at me like this when I was playing, and then I noticed him out of the corner of my eye and I thought, what is this? Is he trying to check me out or or whatever, yeah? So that made me feel a little bit nervous. I mean, I'm not going to jump up and down and do the Han Benning trip, because Han does that very well. He doesn't need an imitator. The other,
but there's a lot of more ways to find work here. But it seems that it's hard for you, although you're, in my eyes, you're almost a genius. It almost seems that it's hard for you to find work. Even being a brilliant drummer.
I wouldn't say that. Those
are my words.
Fine, okay. I didn't hear that. I don't want to go and play in the Alto again or Bourbon Street again, or I prefer being active with workshops and teaching amateurs and beginners. I find that a lot rewarding and a lot of fun to do. Yeah. Of course, it's nice to have concerts and to get well paid. Yeah. But the actual thing of hanging out with the so-called top hierarchy, if you like, I don't like to do that anymore. Years ago in the old Bim House, that was the best place to play in Holland. It's wonderful. Yeah. Now the Bim House is, well, the Bim House now is what the Bim House is. It is not the same as it was in the early 80s. Then it was, everyone was hanging out there, everyone had a good time. Now it's like, let's go to the Bim House and be seen. Yeah. And be seen talking with the top artists.
So the jazz circuit has become more closed, so to say.
I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm. Next question.
Alcohol?
Oh, nothing wrong with a bit of beer and wine. But the old days of drinking Geneva and falling off my bike and cracking bones, they're gone.
Yeah, you've drunk a lot.
Oh, certainly. I make no secret about that. In fact, that's probably one of the main reasons a lot of musicians didn't want to play with me, because I was always drunk. Not on the gig, but after the gig.
Was it oh, so that had nothing to do with your nervousness?
No, that was just because I like to drink. Especially oude jenever.
And when did you stop drinking so much?
When I met Kika. Because she refuses to have hard drink on the Vios, on the boat. So it was either give up Kika or give up jenever. So I gave up jenever.
So now your reputation of an alcoholic is not not actual anymore.
I don't know, because I don't hang out so much in the BIM house or other concerts. I don't really go so much to those. So people don't know that I'm still alive. In fact, I'll tell you another funny story. Some months ago, I went to the session in the BIM house. And I saw an old friend there, a piano player, which I hadn't seen for about 5 years. And she was playing piano on the session, and then I just jumped up and sat behind the drums. And she looked up, and there I was, and then she screamed and said, "Petro, I thought you were dead!" So, it's because I've been off the scene for 5 or 6 years. And a lot of people also thought I went back to Australia, because I haven't been hanging out. Just because I didn't want to.
But are you now via this program making a comeback?
I haven't been away. No, a comeback. Yeah, look, I would like.
Maybe this is a new period in your life.
Yeah, it could be. I haven't written any music for a long time. I would like to put my own band again together, but with the people that I want to play with, they're not here. The musicians that are here, like the young conservatory musicians, it's not, the music that they are writing is not really interesting for me.
Why is that?
Well, it's trying to be very intellectual, pseudo-intellectual, if you like.
But aren't you becoming an old man who says that in the yesterdays were much better?
I'm only 47. That's not old. I still feel 26.
But you don't find the young musicians inspiring?
No, not really. Next question.
Why is that? Why is it that the conservatory musicians are not having the soul of?
Because they don't teach that in the conservatory. In the conservatory, they just teach you A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Mm-hmm. You have to find your own soul, your own heart in the music. And these young musicians come out of the conservatory, and they think they know everything. Technically, they might. That's correct. But they don't know how to swing. Now, when I say swing, I don't mean 1, 2, 3, 4. No. To swing is an internal thing. Yeah. The trouble is with a lot of the young musicians, they don't really have to struggle. They have outcaring. Either they have rich parents or they have outcaring. They don't have to struggle. They don't have to go and play in the Alto or Bourbon Street. They don't have to do part-time jobs because they have enough money to survive, and they get subsidized and all this. And in London, when I was playing in London, there was no subsidy. No. We had to play for very little money, and we had to struggle very hard to make money.
And in Holland, you delivered the Weekamp.
Yeah, at that time for about a year and a half or so, because I had no money, I had no gigs, I had no home, sleeping on people's floors. Sleeping with my bike in the Bergen, being totally drunk, but delivering Vacam for 8 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week, yeah. And I made a lot of money. They pay quite good. Vacamp is...
But still, isn't that a waste of talent?
No, it's a question of survival.
And maybe is also something that is a contribution to your style and to your way of playing. Surviving. You're a survivor.
Of course. I'm always struggling, always have an inside struggle. No, my style...
About what?
About just surviving, being a human being on this planet with all the terrible things happening on this planet. Musicians, especially jazz musicians, tend to reflect what's going around them in the environment and the society, and that comes out in their music. Now, the intellectual ones, it's like, oh, there's a war now in somewhere, there's a war about somewhere else. Oh, let's write about that, yeah? Well, they should go into those countries and look, and not just accept what you see on the media, on the television, on the radio.
But how do you do that?
Well, I've been on the street. I know what it's like. I've seen what happens on the street.
Yeah.
So I've been part of that. And in a way, it's been very interesting, instructive, because I learned a lot. Because I've seen homeless people before when I've had a lot of money, and I thought, well, those poor people, fine, that's their business. Now, since I was kicked out of my house and I was in their situation, I saw it from their side of it and not from the other side of it. So that made me very strong. Now I can say, I've been there, I've done that. I know what the struggle is all about.
But now the struggle is only in your head.
No, and in my body. That's why.
What part of your body?
My hands, head, feet, limbs, arms. That's why I play drums. It gives me a release.
Petro, thanks.
Graag gedaan.